That's okay.
All right, perfect. Well, everybody, today I'm speaking with Joram van Klavaren, who is a Dutch politician, and he actually became well known in 2018 when he converted to Islam halfway through writing his book on against Islam, actually. So this is a really a great story, and he's also, from politics. So I guess this interview will be really fruitful. So thank you so much, Joram, for joining me today.
No, thank you very much for the invitation.
Definitely. Maybe we can start before anything happened with Islam. Uh, with regards to the political party you were representing in Netherlands. So, what sort of maybe philosophy was the party, going for, and maybe what was your background also as a a person? Were you a Christian or an atheist or something like that?
Yeah. Well, the political party is called the Freedom Party, the PVV in Dutch. And perhaps some people know the leader of the party. His name is Geert Wilders, the guy with the blonde hair. He's very anti-Islam, and the ideological orientation of the party was nationalistic, but most of it was very anti-Islam. The purpose of the party that he realized in the past was that he said, "I want to have a party that fights against Islam." So the core business of the party wasn't nationalism. Of course, it has nationalistic aspects, but the core business of the party was really fighting Islam.
Mhm. Maybe a quick question before that. How many Muslims are in the Netherlands? Or do you have any numbers around that?
Yeah, between 850,000 and 1 million.
Okay,
So it's about 4.9 or 5% of the population.
got it. From my experience, those parties tend to, have some Christian background, but there are already established Christian Democrat parties all around Europe. So, ooh,
Yeah, the party wasn't Christian. Well, to answer your other question, I
mhm,
come from a Protestant Christian background, and when you look at the denomination, it was Reformed, the Reformed Church, and in the Netherlands, it's kind of a strict denomination. Yeah, I was raised as a Christian boy. We went to church. I got a Christian name, or a biblical name at least. Uh, we were all baptized. My father read from the Bible before we ate. We prayed, stuff like that. So we did all the normal things that Christian families do. I was raised in that way as well, but I was maybe a little bit too interested in the background of my own religion, Christianity, in that day. So what I did was starting to read about theological questions and polemics between Christianity, the Reformed form of Christianity, and other denominations like the Catholic Church, but also other religions. And one of the big topics in the past was the battle, so to say, between Christianity and Islam, of course, especially in the east of Europe. It's maybe a little bit more alive than in Western Europe because of the Ottoman Empire, of course, in the past. But there was something that got my attention. I was very interested in that part of history, also because our country got his independence partly due to the help of the Ottoman Empire. And that's kind of strange when you look at it from a European perspective, because most of the countries in the east of Europe, of course, were colonized or had problems with the Ottoman Empire, not in a religious way, but in a political sense. And the Netherlands was founded with help of the Ottoman Empire because the Netherlands used to be a colony of Spain. It's still in our national anthem. We say we bring honor to the King of Spain. So it's kind of strange,
really?
but
I never heard this. Really?
yeah. And we fought against the South was Catholic and the North was Protestant. And
Hmm.
our founding father, William of Orange, he was in secret. He converted to the Protestant form of Christianity. But of course, Spain was Catholic, and they said, "Well, we want to get rid of this sect, this awful new form of Christianity. So we have to wipe them all out. And so they started almost a civil war in the Netherlands. But William of Orange, the founder of the Netherlands, said, no, we cannot do that, because of course he himself became a Protestant. So in the end, he got into a fight with the Spanish king. And then he said, well, I have to leave that side of the war, so to say. And he started defending his own country. And of course, the Spanish Empire was much too big for a small group of people in the Netherlands to fight. So they started looking around for help. And one of the people they asked was the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, because they said, well, your enemy is our enemy, so maybe we can be friends. And they said, well, you're interested when you look at, you're interesting when you look at it from a geographical point of view, because the Ottoman Empire saw it when it comes to trade and stuff like that. But also, of course, because they didn't like the Spanish as well. So in the end, the Ottoman Empire gave a lot of money, and they gave a lot of weapons to the Protestant part of the Netherlands, and they started fighting. And in the end, the Protestants won, and they became independent. And there's a celebration every year still for the last 400 years or so. And it's called Leidsontzet. It means liberation of Leiden. And people walk around with half moons, crescent moons, and they bring honor to the Ottoman Empire. So it's kind of strange. But it's so the interest part of religion when it comes to Christianity and Islam was there a little bit, because I read about this story in the past. But of course, I was a strict Christian person, so I thought, well, when I look at it from a theological point of view, the Ottoman Empire, of course, represented everything that is not Christianity, because as Christians, we back then believed, of course, in the crucifixion of Christ, the resurrection, original sin, all those big dogmas, of course. And Islam didn't, so the Ottoman Empire didn't as well. So they were still the enemy, and that's how I got involved in this discussion, so to say, for myself. And in the end, I started going to university, and I did comparative religion. But the first day of my studies was September 11, 2001. So the attack on the World Trade Center. That was my first day of comparative religion. And a few years later, a famous filmmaker in the Netherlands, Theo van Gogh, he was killed by a jihadi guy. And then of course you saw a lot of suicide bombings and attacks and stuff like that all over Europe, in London, Madrid, several other places. So the negative image that I already had because of the theological background that I was interested in, most of the Christian boys that I knew back then, they said, wow, why are you interested in stuff from such a long time ago? I said, well, that makes us who we are. So that was, but I got confirmed in my negative views of Islam by those suicide attacks and the terror, etc., etc. So in the end, I thought to myself, well, what can I do? How can I protect our country and the West, and the West in the big sense of the West, so whole of Europe and the United States and Australia and stuff like that. And I thought to myself, well, I have to go into politics, because we can change the law then, and we can do something about the invasion, as I saw it back then, of Muslims into Europe. And I was looking for the most anti-Islamic party, and that was Geert Wilders. He started his party in 2004. So I was still in college, and the first, the first contacts were made when I was still a student. In the end, I joined the party, and I became a member of parliament, and I became the spokesman on the topic of Islam. So that's how I got involved in the organization. But to answer another part of your question, it isn't a Christian organization. It is a secular organization. And that was one of the things that my grandfather, he was a very Christian man. His critique was, well, why are you joining a secular party? Why would you fight for an atheist? And I told him, well, he is at least more anti-Islam than all the Christian parties in the Netherlands combined. And he said, well, you're still fighting for an atheist. So you shouldn't do that. So that was his theological point of view, and he didn't like Islam either. That was sure. But yeah, I thought, well, I think the danger of Islam was bigger than my aversion against atheism back then.
Right. Are a majority of Dutch people atheists, or would you say they're still practice like some cultural Christianity, whether Protestant or Catholic?
Well, of course, in a historical sense, the Netherlands is a Christian country because the Netherlands Christianized in around the year 600. And so the Netherlands has been Christian for almost 1400 years. So there's a lot of Christianity in a cultural sense in the Netherlands when you look at the landscape, churches, names of people, our language, stuff like that. But there is a research done in the Netherlands, and it's every 10 years. And they started in 1966. And what they do, it's called God in the Netherlands. And then they ask people in the Netherlands, what do you think about religion in general? What do you think about Christianity? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in heaven? Do you believe in hell? All those core questions they ask. And in 2016, so a few years ago, there was the last one. They said the Netherlands is not a Christian country anymore, because they said for the first time in history, there were more people who called themselves specific atheists than theists. And that's all religions combined in the Netherlands. So Muslims, Christians, Jews, whatever, all the groups together, they were in a minority compared to the people who called themselves explicitly an atheist. So formally, the Netherlands is an atheistic country now when you look at the majority of the people.
Yeah, I think this is very similar. Like we got Christianized in around 800, the year 800. So everywhere you see churches and everything like that, which is very similar. There's just no Protestants that much. It's more Catholic, but it's majority atheists, like at this point, for sure. In Czech Republic, in Austria, and Slovakia, I guess. Even though some, like 50% maybe claim that they are Christian, but I would say that maybe they just have like a wedding in a church or go to a funeral, but other than that, there's not much. Because it seems like your upbringing was kind of like stricter and you had to like pray and stuff, which I actually was like an altar boy. So I was helping the priest and I was, doing all these things as well, baptized. And then at the age of 15, you get, what's it called? Christening, or I'm not sure what's the expression. Yeah, and and then I guess in puberty people lose this. So did you actually believe in Christianity when you were like 18, or when you were studying, or did you started to have doubts, or were you still like on board with it?
Well, I was a really practicing Christian, so I believed very strong in Christianity. But like you said, when you are around 15 or 16 years, for the first time, you are starting to realize that you are perhaps a little bit different than other people who do not believe in God. So you start questioning certain topics, certain dogmas of your own religion. So the life questions, what happens after death, really a God? And it was for me the first time that I doubted a little bit some dogmas. For example, the Trinity of Christ, of the Trinity of God, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. There was something that I couldn't understand, and so I started questioning certain points of the dogma of Christianity, but the answers were never really satisfying. But when I was around 18, 19, and you go to college and stuff like that, I said, well, okay, perhaps I just don't know everything, and that's just part of the religion. It's kind of a mystery, as they say. And I put it aside and I said, well, I believe in God, I'm Christian, and in a cultural sense, I do what I have to do. And that's a few years later, so I'm forwarding now the story. When I was starting writing my anti-Islam book, and perhaps we come back to the part between later, but when I start writing my anti-Islam book, those questions popped up again, because I forgot about them. But when I was writing about Islam and writing about Christianity, I was comparing them. I saw the differences. And of course, when you are trying to set aside, in this case, Islam, you have to first explain what is Islam. So that was what I'm doing in the book. I was explaining what is Islam. But when I was reading about the concept of Tawhid, of the unity of God, and of course I was much older then than compared to when I was 16, 17, I thought to myself, well, although I don't like Islam, of course, it was a lot more logical than the concept of the Trinity. So the questions I had back then got answered in an Islamic way. So my Christian questions got Islamic answers. And it was the first part of the journey towards Islam.
Did you read the Quran, or did you like do some research online through these questions, or were you actually reading the Quran when you were writing the book as an anti-Muslim at that point?
Yeah, well, I read the Quran before because I studied comparative religion. So one of the big topics, of course, is Islam. Only the big difference is I was still very much into my own bubble, so to say. I was a Christian boy, and I looked at everything through my Christian glasses. So everything that professors told me in university that wasn't completely in line with the things I thought were right and were true, I thought, yeah, okay, I'll learn them for you. I make the test, I pass the test, but then again, I think you're still crazy for teaching stuff like this. So that was what I did. But after I started doubting certain dogmas, then of course you put your glasses aside, and then the whole world started changing a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially when it came to Islam. So I already read the Quran, but I read the Quran as a study object, not as something that could be true with a capital T.
Yeah. I'm looking back because I'm looking at our political situation. So it's similar, but the people who are anti-Islam are usually like very close to Nazis or like fascists kind of groups, and they got actually into the parliament recently. But the real anti-religious people are actually like these Freedom Party, but it's a liberal party that wants free marijuana, free everything basically. So it's a slightly different because I don't think we have that many Muslims. So we have like overall there's like 5,000 or 10,000 Muslims. So it's really it's nothing, but everywhere you see like Sharia law or like we will protect our nation against Islam, and there's no one. So it's really funny, but how did your party actually get into the parliament? Because I know there's a threshold, I guess you have to have certain percentage. Here is 5%. I'm not sure how it's there, but like, is Islam really that big of a deal in Netherlands when it's just 5% of the population? Did you have some negative experiences with Muslims before? And then how many years did it take for the party to get maybe from just like a small group on some regional level to actually made it to parliament? Like, was it like a very quick, win, let's say?
Yeah, it was very quick because the founder of the party, Geert Wilders, he was a member of another party, of the Liberal Party. Before he started his Freedom Party, he was a member of the Liberal Party, and he was one of the more important persons because he was, so to say, in a class of talented politicians in that specific organization. But in 2004, he got into an argument with his own political party, and that's the party, our Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, now. He is of the same party that Geert Wilders was a member of, the VVD, the VVD. But the VVD said, well, they were talking about Turkey as a future member state of the European Union back then. It was
right.
They still are talking about it now, so it's a long time ago. But in 2004, in the Dutch parliament, there was a whole discussion going on, and the VVD said, well, we cannot say that Turkey will never be a member state. And Geert Wilders said, well, that's ridiculous. That's an Islamic country, etc., etc., and the whole the whole rhetoric that you still hear now was coming out. But what he said is that if the party does not change their point of view when it comes to Turkey, I will leave the party. And then they said, well, he will never leave the party, but he did. And then he left, and a lot of people in the Netherlands aren't too big a fan of the European Union. It's about 30-40% who really dislikes the European Union. So that's a big group because we have around 17 million people here. So that's a big group. And a lot of people don't like Islam, and they don't like Turks, and they don't like Moroccan people because of maybe their ethnicity, but also because they're Muslims. So when he left on this topic, European Union and Islam, that's a good combination in political sense. So what he did was leaving, and then what I just told you, Theo van Gogh, the famous filmmaker, was murdered in the Netherlands. And then he said, "Well, look, this is our future. We will all die. Sharia law, etc., etc." So then there were parliamentary elections, and he started from nothing, and he came into parliament with 9 seats, and that's in we have 150 seats, so that's
we have the same,
big way of coming in. And in 2010, that was the time that I became a member of parliament as well. Then we grew from 6 to 24. So we became the second party after 2 elections. And they still are the second party now in the Netherlands. So it was very quick.
That's very fast, yeah. We have a similar case here as well, but like that's very fast. You have to really pick an issue that's like on top of everybody's mind to get those numbers, like 24%.
Yeah, something that people.
That's really crazy. And so basically, you were writing about you were a member of the parliament. I guess you were. What was your kind of function within the party? You were the speaker of the party, or what was specific?
Yeah, I was a member of the party, of course, and I was the spokesperson on the topic of integration. So how can immigrants adapt to society, and of Islam, because in the Freedom Party, of course, we had a separate topic, and it was called Islam, because the party, of course, was founded to fight Islam. So it was a very important part of the whole political agenda.
Yeah,
I was the spokesperson on that. But in 2014, there was this issue that Geert Wilders said he wanted less Moroccans in the Netherlands. And he said it during a political rally. But I didn't know he was going to say that. And of course, like I said, I was the spokesperson. So it was kind of strange that I was confronted with something on the news that I didn't know I was going to defend in the future. So I asked him, what is this? Is it a new policy or whatever? And then he said, well, that's something we always said. And I said, well, that's not what you always said. You always said we want less Muslims, we want less Islam. But there, of course, there were also Moroccan people who are not Muslim. They're atheist or Jewish or Christian, whatever. So I thought to myself, because in the Freedom Party, the whole in the whole organization in the country, there were also Moroccan people working for the Freedom Party. Of course, they were not Muslims, but they worked for. And so I felt like kind of a betrayal to say we want to get rid of all the Muslims, and he did of the Moroccan, and he didn't say it explicitly like that. Well, let's remove. He asked the people during the rally, do you want more or less Moroccans in the Netherlands? And then everybody starts shouting less, less, less. So what it looked like almost like a fascist 1933 setting. And then he said, well, I'll make that happen. So in an indirect way, he said, well, I'll make sure that there will be less Moroccans in the Netherlands. But I didn't, it wasn't my cup of tea, because I said, well, I don't like Islam. I still didn't like Islam back then. But it wasn't that I necessarily hated Moroccan people or something. So I said, well, I have to defend it. So we have to change it or do something about it. And he said, well, we're not going to change anything, and we're not going to do anything about it. This is what it is. So you have to deal with it and do your job. And then I left the party. I started an own fraction, as we say, an own group in Parliament with some other people. And then I finally had the time to fulfill my long-held desire, and I was writing an anti-Islam book, because although I left the Freedom Party, I still hated Islam. But when you are in the Freedom Party, of course, Geert Wilders is the main person, the most important person when it comes to the topic of Islam. So he wrote the books, he did the articles, he did the interviews, etc. And sometimes when he wasn't able to, then I came as the second person. But now when I was out of the party, I finally had the time to do what I wanted to do, and I was writing my book. And so that's how I started writing my anti-Islam book. But during the writing, I came across so much information that was at odds with the things I thought I knew, that it started changing my way of looking at Islam and the perception I had. So that's how it started.
Yeah, and like looking back at those values, usually these parties have, let's say the freedom parties usually call themselves like that all over Europe. Like when I look back on these, because I used to hate Islam as well, and I was an atheist for like 10 years after I left Christianity. So I now looking back at the core fundamentals of those parties, their values are sort of not baseless, but they are based on just like theories which haven't really been specified, because essentially freedom is a very vague term, and it can mean anything that you can imagine under freedom. You can be actually claiming to be free under Islam because you're free from your desires. So I'm expressing my freedom more than you are expressing it by maybe taking off your clothes or something. So like philosophically speaking, you get to these contradictions, and these values, they sound very nice on paper, but when you strip them away, it's very difficult to actually figure out like where did they come from. Would they come from John Locke, from liberalism when he wrote the book, or what was the idea behind it? And a lot of these parties haven't really done that research, and so that's just a side note. And I remember when I also, as an atheist, I didn't like Islam. I used to make videos about the Quran, and I would pick specific verses which would be like violent, and I would just try to make a video about it, without trying to comprehend or understand anything. Just like, no, I was never open to it. So if at that stage I would even read the Quran, I wouldn't be guided, not even guided. I wouldn't even, try to understand what was being said to me. So it's very crucial that people, have an open mind when going into this research, as you did probably, because you were trying to figure out the truth, I assume. So you were digging deep, and when you dig deep into Islam, you really find the truth. Because I did the same thing, not in the book, but it definitely is an interesting process. So what happened that kind of like struck you when you were, doing your research while writing the book?
Yeah, well, I think when I come back to what you said, because what I found really beautiful was that it's also a surah, a chapter in the Quran that mentions the part that you just mentioned, that people have to be open to receive, so to say.
And yeah, especially on that, I was really struggling with like, why is Allah not guiding everyone? Like, why are just few people guided? And then I understood what you just mentioned, that like, no, you have to be open before that. So it's not like, Allah refuses to guide some people. Those people are not opened yet. So it wouldn't make, it doesn't even matter what you say. Like it can become, the angel Gabriel can come down and they would still not believe anything. So it's, it's for a reason it says that. Yeah. So, but sorry for interrupting.
No, it's a great addition. But in the Quran, there's a text, and it says it's not the eyes that are blind, but the hearts. And that was I think the case with me, because in the end, after I read it, and I'll answer your question later on, what I did was comparing everything. So I started comparing the God concept of who is God in Christianity, who is God in Islam, who is a prophet in Christianity, who is a prophet in Islam, What prophets do we have in Christianity? What prophets do we have in Islam? How do people look at, for example, war, the position of women, Judaism? Well, name all the topics that are very hot in political discussions nowadays. And in the end, I didn't have any arguments anymore to say, well, for example, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is not a messenger. But for example, Moses or Joshua are messengers. Because I started comparing them when it comes to the way they acted in their personal life. I started comparing them how they acted on the battlefield, for example. And then I thought to myself, well, the Islam version, and I'm not talking about all Muslims all around the world, but when I look at the book and I look at the sources and especially the example of Muhammad, it was so much more humane than the things I found in the Bible. So I said to myself, well, how can I believe this and say Islam is not true when I have no real arguments anymore? Or I have to say to myself, well, I think the whole Bible and everything, God, etc., is not true as well. But there were so much evidence and so much arguments for the existence of God, theological, and when it comes to the theological argument, cosmological argument, moral arguments for the existence of God. And like I said, I never became an atheist. So I always believed in God, whether it was the Christian God or Muslim God. It was, for me, there was a God. So I never doubted that. So it was purely the theological foundations of Islam that I was searching for. What is Islam? What is Christianity? And because I got so convinced by Islam, that made me in the end accept the truth.
How long did it take to do the research and like say Shahada, let's say? Was it like 1 year or how long?
Altogether, no, I think maybe 3.5 years.
Okay.
In the end, well, it started because, like I said, I got so much information that was at odds with the things I thought I knew. And what I did, because I thought, well, if I'm writing my book and it will be published, a lot of people who do like Islam or hate me or my former party will attack me in the book. So it has to be very correct. Everything I say I have to be sure that it's correct. So what I did, I was starting to write to people of authority when it comes to Islam, but also Christianity, Judaism. And one of the persons I wrote to was Abdul Hakim Murad. He's a professor from Cambridge University. His English name is Tim Winter. And I told him, well, my name is Joram van Klavaren. I put a little Wikipedia link down my mail because it's also in English. So I thought, well, then he knows who I am, because it's kind of strange that an anti-Islamic guy from the Dutch parliament is writing to a Muslim professor in England. So I thought, well, perhaps he will never answer, but at least I tried because I wanted to have the correct information. And he didn't answer for about 6 weeks. So I almost forgot about him and my mail to him. But all of a sudden, he was very extensive because I got an email and it was about 17 pages with all explanations. And he asked me some questions that I started answering for him. And then he said to me, well, I got a whole list of books. Give me your list of books. So I gave him a list of the books, my anti-Islamic books. And he said, well, I understand why you think the way you think, but it's not correct. So he said, well, read the books I give to you. And he gave some authors, he gave some articles and stuff like that. And he said, read these books and then reread your old books. So you can see where they, the writers of my old anti-Islam books, take the wrong turn, or where they leave some crucial information behind, or whether they don't know it or they do it on purpose. That's not important, but they leave some information aside. So that's what I did. And in the end, and that took a lot of years, a lot of time, after comparing, and it made so much things clear for me, because I had also, like most of the anti-Islamic persons, and perhaps you were one like myself, there were it's almost like there's a concept with some standardized arguments against Islam. But in the end, all those arguments were answered in a very logical, very normal way. I got so much explanation that I didn't have arguments anymore. And when I really started reading about his life, and I read the book of Martin Links.
I have the book. It's like a green book, right? Like
big book. Yeah. It's about his life, and it was based on the earliest sources, like the Sirat and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was reading it, it changed my way of looking at him as a person, because when I was young, and because of the denomination of my church, when you look at the old books that were written about Islam and the Prophet of Islam, were very negative. They said he is the Antichrist. He's everything what Christianity is not, in the most negative way. So my view of him was so negative that it was almost impossible to change. But because I read about his life and I read about what he did from the own sources, the Islamic sources, that started changing. And when I got the questions I did have back then after I read the books, I asked him, Professor Abdul Hakim Murad, and he answered me and he said, well, try to get some extra information. You can read this book or that book. And it was not only Christian books or not only Islamic books, also Christian books he pointed to. For example, Hans Kuhn. He's a very famous Catholic professor, German Catholic professor from, I think he died a few years ago, but he was very honest when it comes to Islam and also when it comes to Christianity. And he also said, well, I accept Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, as a messenger. And I thought to myself, well, how is it possible that a Catholic theological very studied person accepts him, and that I, as a kind of not an expert on this topic, say, well, I got the arguments to say he's not what he claims to be. So that's really what changed my mind and what changed the way I looked at them. It's in the end, it's about knowledge. Do you really know what Islam stands for? Did you try to understand what happened in the past? Take the context, that's very important. Take the context with each and every surah, all the things that happened. Because when you do it like that and you leave the context out, yeah, you can change everything you want. Even our conversation, if people start cut and paste, you can have a very extreme, crazy talk. But when you see the whole conversation of what we have now, then everybody says, okay, that's a normal discussion between two healthy young men.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I never remember even discussing Islam at school as only Judaism. Like Judaism, Christianity, okay, but like Islam, never even slightly. We just learned about it, but maybe on one page during 9 years, but nothing much. So I don't know why that is, but maybe it's because we didn't really engage with them in our history. But looking at your conversion, so do you remember a specific moment when your maybe fitra got awakened, or I don't know if it was like a spiritual moment or something like that, but like, do you remember when it clicked for you and you were like, okay, I guess I'm ready, I just need some more time? But you knew like, I will probably become a Muslim, like it's gonna happen, I just don't know when, but I can't go back basically.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't like one moment. It was kind of a process. And I started because you're not able to see it now, but in the back of my home, there's a big table and there's a lot of books. And I started writing with a very anti-Islamic book. So one of the books called Endgame in Dutch. It's a very famous anti-Islamic book in the Netherlands. And it's about a coming war between Islam and the West. But when I finished, so to say, my research, there was another book on the table, and it's called Islam, the Misunderstood Religion. So there was a lot of books in between, of course, in a literal sense, but also in a symbolic way. But that was the whole process. So in the end, for me, one of the moments that I thought, well, I think that Muhammad and his being and the way he is started changing my point of view when it comes to Islam was the story of Hind. I don't know if you know the story of Hind. There was a girl, and she was very angry when it comes to Islam because it was a new movement. They preach one God, etc., and they hated the whole movement, and especially the leader of the movement, of course. So what she did in the end, she gave money to kill the favorite uncle of the prophet. And that's what she did. And in the end, the uncle was murdered, and he even got mutilated. So they cut off his nose, they cut off his ears, and
I mean Hamza or
yeah.
Hamza uncle, yeah.
And what they did, of course, people were parading with body parts of the murdered family member, and of course, it's very it's a sick way of behaving. But a few years later, of course, the prophet was very sad. And a few years later, he came into power, and then he met Hind again. So when I was reading that, I thought, okay, where is the page that her head gets cut off? Because that was the mindset I had when it came to the prophet. So I said, okay, he will murder her, he will torture her, but he didn't do that. He said, well, welcome, Hind, and he basically forgave her and gave her a new chance. So he didn't took any revenge. And for me, that was very eye-opening, because when I was reading back then, in my mind, he still was the Antichrist. So, well, the Antichrist will not forgive, of course, his enemies. And he will not forgive, especially not someone who kills one of his favorite uncles. But he did. And in the end, she got so convinced that she even became a Muslim. So for me, there was the one of the important stories, one of the important narratives that changed the way I looked at the prophet. And in the end, after I finished all the books, I still didn't like Islam. And of course, that's why I mentioned the surah where we just talked about, it's not the eyes that are blind, but the hearts. In the end, I saw everything on my table. I wrote it down with the pen and the computer, and I thought, okay, Islam is the truth, but I still couldn't accept it because I think it's ridiculous. I hated Islam, hated Muslims. And then I will go out and say, hi, people, I became a Muslim. It's kind of a crazy way of dealing with reality, so to say. But it was what it is. But I thought to myself, well, okay, I leave it there and that's it. I just, maybe I don't do anything with the book at all. This is what it is. And I leave it. And then I read the surah. And that surah, it came right in front of me because I was putting away all the books. And one of the books that I was putting away was the Quran, but it was open on that page. And it was the first time that I saw this surah with an open mind. And I thought, well, this is what it is. My eyes really can see it because I wrote it down myself, but my heart is not open. It's like my heart is blind and my eyes can see. And then I went to bed, and the next day I got out of bed and I thought to myself, well, okay, I think I'm being a Muslim from now on. Because it was like it was overnight, but of course it was a long process before that moment really came.
Yeah, I guess you have a few weeks of cognitive dissonance, so you're like, this is true, but you don't want to accept it, and you like live your life still in the old kind of lifestyle, but like, oh, there's this thing in the back of my mind. I know there's something there, because for me also, like, I lived a few months. For me, I had a moment where I knew, like, okay, Islam is for sure true, but I'm gonna ignore it. I'm just gonna live my life because I can't become a Muslim. Like, it's crazy. And then I remember I just said one day, I'm gonna start practicing everything just out of fun, just like praying 5 times a day and just seeing if anything changes. And I started doing that. And I was praying like wrongly. I wasn't praying, I wasn't saying Al-Fatiha. I was just doing in my own thing, but trying to just do it properly so that if I become a Muslim, it's not going to be like a big jump. It's going to be like, I'm going to ease my way into it because I will already pray 5 times a day. I will already kind of not drink alcohol. So I was trying these things and I saw like results in my life, like really huge impact. And I was like, okay, there's like wisdom behind these teachings. And like, this is really helping me 5 times a day to pray. And and then again, I had like a fitra moments, when kind of everything is aligned, and I don't know, I was jogging and just everything came together, and I was like, okay, I need to become a Muslim. Like, what am I doing? Why am I practicing this? Like, I know this is gonna be true, and it's gonna be probably difficult, but like, I can't live my life going forward with this, because I was kind of in a depression for a couple of years. I was always, as an atheist, you have this nihilistic perspective of like, nothing matters. There's no point in the universe. Like, you just make your money and then buy a house, and that's it, basically. Like, you're finished. But yeah, so when I discovered something deeper, it was like really important for me. And I also, one book, Islam Between East and West, was really really great, and it's written by President of Bosnia. And I would really recommend it if you haven't touched it. It's an amazing book, especially for like European Muslims. It's really cool. So I was just wondering, have you started practicing also before, just some of the things in Islam, maybe in your own way, or did you just kind of do it after your Shahada, maybe?
No, a lot of things I already did because, for example, not eating pork.
Mm.
Because I know a lot of conferences. Well, it was kind of hard not to eat pork. But when I was around 16 or 17, I stopped eating pork because I got pimples because of the fat. So I started eating that. So things like that was very easy, and I didn't drink that much alcohol because when we got our first child, I said, well, it's wrong to be for so to say drunk when I'm carrying my baby to bed, for example. So I didn't want to do it anymore. So it was like a natural way of leaving certain things behind and starting all over again as a mature person. But later on, of course, it's logical and it fits the whole way. And but it was very gradual. It was very in phases, just like Islam itself. It wasn't brought overnight. Of course, it took what is it, 23 years to bring the message. So, and I think especially for European Muslims, because there is a big gap between the way Europe's history is founded and when you become a Muslim, you are. So I think it has a certain wisdom behind it as well, that there are certain steps you have to take, and that's not all over a night and not 1 or 2 weeks, but it takes time. But no, I didn't start really practicing before, after, of course. But yeah, it was easy for me because some things I just didn't do, so it wasn't too hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like 2 years ago, if you told me you'll be a Muslim, I would be like laughing at you, like, what? That's ridiculous. I was just watching a few Islamic videos and just kind of like really interested about it, but never kind of fully into it. But yeah, it kind of you know, it gives you that that boost, and then once you start digging through it, it is a it's gonna mess up your your values and everything. So I was wondering, from your perspective as like a European and now a Muslim, you know, the situation in Europe in general when it comes to like politics against Islam and stuff that's happening right now in Afghanistan. Like, as I look at the headlines right now, all the times now it's about what's happening in Afghanistan, and most of the headlines say like, "This is what Sharia law is," and then I open an article and it's like, "Women can't drive, women are being killed," or something, and it's like those things are not in Sharia law at all. I think 90% of things are cultural aspects of Islam, somewhere in Somalia or Saudi or some crazy things. But most of these things are, you know, not there. But I don't know, what do you think about it? Because right now I'm in Austria, in Salzburg, which is a great city, and there's like 5 mosques. And I visited Afghani mosques today, and there was like no one there, just hidden. Again, just like one room, one carpet, and next to it, there's just these magnificent churches, cathedrals everywhere, you know. And I'm just thinking, like, is it ever gonna get into that phase of like maybe Muslims will have, maybe, I'm not saying like a huge mosque or something like that, but like a recognition in Europe? I guess, do you believe that reverts such as you or me or someone like that could change some of the perception of Islam? Because I don't know, how do you look at that? because most Muslims are immigrants, and they tend to be kind of in their own groups, and each mosque has their own kind of like national background, whether it's this is a Somali mosque, this is Algerian, this is Egyptian. And what about the native population, right? Like how I'm not interested in bringing more immigrants. I'm interested in changing Czechs and Slovaks and all these people in, and their hearts, opening their hearts, not other people. So how do you look at that? Maybe do you think it's possible to have Islam in Europe, like a local European Islam?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really is possible. Of course, you already had a local Islam in Europe, one in Bosnia, of course, and of course also in Spain, because the southern of Spain, Andalusia, for 800 years it was Muslim, and one of the greatest inventions, books, philosophical writings have been written there. So it really is possible, and it brought a lot of prosperity back then over there. And it influenced a lot of other people starting their own journey in a technical sense, in a scientific sense, but also in a theological sense. So I think it's very much possible. And I also think that what you said, it's a lot of the crazy stuff, so to say, what you see around the world when it comes to what the people in the West think is Islam is most of the time, like you said, cultural. And the example of not driving a car, for example, is one of the greatest examples, I think, because there's nothing nowhere that says women cannot drive a car, because first of all, back then there were no cars. And for this Saudi Arabia, for example, there are no other Muslim countries in the world where they say you cannot drive a car if you are a Muslim woman. So that's a good example. But in the West, everybody says, well, that's Sharia law. Look at them. Why, women cannot drive cars. And that's not Sharia law. And Sharia law, like a concept, doesn't exist either, of course, because when you look at, for example, the way Islam is practiced in Indonesia or Malaysia, it's very different when you compare it, for example, to Afghanistan, or when you compare Afghanistan to Bosnia, or Bosnia to let's say, Morocco. So it differs all over the world, and that's normal because you have different contexts, different people, different languages, different everything. So, and I think the beauty of Islam is that it's universal. So it fits all those cultures, it fits all those people, and that goes for Europeans as well. It fits Europe like a glove, I think. But people have to open up, and that's one of the things I think that's still something that has to be worked on when it comes to people who are immigrants. And most of the Muslims in our countries are immigrants, of course. I think it should be much more open to the native people, because if you really are a Muslim and you will do your Dawah work, you have to share the message. And you cannot share the message if you stay in your mosque and you keep Islam for yourself. I think it's spreading the word, so to say, that you go out and help people, show people, explain things to people. And I think that it is something that can be done by immigrant people or the children of immigrant people, but also by native converts. And maybe the last group, makes it easier for people in your family or friends or in the neighborhood, because they know you, they see you, it's not scary for them. So I think you can have both worlds working on the bigger program in a positive way. But it takes a lot of opening up from a lot of sides.
Yeah, I just did a meetup in Prague about why women cover in Islam. And a few people showed up, mostly Muslims. It was supposed to be non-Muslims, but just a very small number of non-Muslims showed up. And they told me, like, people don't think about this, like they don't care about Islam. And that's true. When I was non-Muslim, I wasn't like thinking about Islam all the time, right? It's not something you think about. So what do you think is a good way to maybe start a discussion? Because essentially you're talking about like what happens when you die? What's the purpose of life? Like all these things are very hard to kind of just like lay, start a discussion about. Like you can't just start it. Maybe you can do videos and stuff, but people have to search for it and they are already in that mindset. But most people don't want to hear that, even in my family, right? So like, what's your, maybe, do you have any experience with that? How maybe you start a discussion about this topic, maybe with a group of people, a group of politicians, or a group of businessmen, or I don't know, kids at school?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is, and that's what you already do, is just practice what you preach. And if people see your life in a positive way and see a positive change in your life, they will start asking questions. Also, when people pray, for example, when they're working or they're not eating certain kinds of food, sometimes people ask you about it. Why don't you do that? Or what is this? Or even when there's something negative on the news, a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it. It's too difficult," stuff like that. But on the other way, I always think, well, it's an opportunity to explain something, to do your Dawah work. So I think you have to change the mindset a little bit. It's not, even though sometimes the first thing is a negative topic on the news, for example, you can change that and make it an informative discussion. And you can give some information to people, and the fact that they ask a question, it tells you they're interested in a way, and it's not always interested, but maybe that's the first step. So I think practicing and answering questions that people have is very very important. And another thing, of course, is organizing events where you can do something kind for people. For example, if there are homeless people and you start sharing blankets in the winter, or you give some soup, and people ask you, why are you doing this? Well, because of my religion. And then they see, hey, he's doing something very positive for people who are left alone by a lot of people, and nobody cares for them except this Muslim guy. And I think that's important. And a lot of people also stop talking or going to discussions on television, opinion programs and stuff like that. And I think it's very important to be there as well, because if you are not there and nobody gives the people of news another narrative, a new way of looking at certain topics, for example, Afghanistan or Islam in general, then that's the only thing people back at home will hear. So I think it's very important that show up all the time. Make sure that you are in, for example, politics or in the media or whatever, where you can share and show people what Islam is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me,
it's sometimes difficult.
Yeah, it's just crazy that many people just live their life without ever asking those questions. Like they just, if you start asking them, they just get so apprehensive. Like, I don't want to think about it. And it's just like, well, you just want to kind of like live your life and maybe like buy a house, but what happens then? Like, what about, okay, you have a family, but what then? Like, what is the purpose, right, behind those things? Like, what if you fulfill your dream? What happens then? Like, people don't really want to think about it. And to me, I couldn't not think about it, which made me depressed and then led me to Islam. So I see it now. But I don't know why people, I mean, I understand probably why, but people just want to be distracted all the time usually, and, get involved in many crazy things. But yeah, hopefully, inshallah, in the future, these things will change.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest problems in Europe now is because one of the things you asked before was about the news and the geopolitical context we're in right now, and that people don't care about Islam. And that, I think that's true in the West. A lot of people don't care, or they're very negative. That's one of those two most of the time. But I think one of the biggest problems in Europe is secularism. Because a lot of people in the Netherlands, it's very clear to see that from around, let's say, the end of 1960, starting at the beginning of 1970 till today, you see that the influence of Christianity in the case of Europe started declining. And because people are not raised in a religious way, they are not trained to ask questions, religious questions. They just don't know. I used to teach for a while, and we have a gymnasium. I don't know if you know what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, we have the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, it's the highest level, so to say. Children are around 16, 17. And one day we were in a museum, and there was a big painting, and the painting was about Adam and Eve. So we were walking around, and I asked the children, "What do you see here?" And they said, "Well, two people almost naked staring at a tree." And I said, "Well, who do you think they are?" "I don't know." And I thought, well, that's kind of shocking that the future elite of the country has no clue, no idea who those people are on the painting. And that's so fundamental, not even if you're not religious, so fundamental for the history and the whole culture of Europe and for the whole world. And they just didn't know. And it wasn't that they are hating religion or so, they just don't know.
Mhm.
And I think that's the biggest problem here. And because people don't know religion anymore in a broader sense, and they don't have any religious feelings, it makes it very easy for them to put religious people aside, to say, oh, they are crazy, they believe in fairy tales, etc., because they're not trained to, they're almost illiterate in a religious sense. And I think that's something we have to work on as well. So, of course, you bring the message with a capital M of Islam. But besides that, I think it's very important to make sure that people start seeing the metaphysical reality as well, because
Right.
that's one, that they know there is a God. And the second step is, who is God? How does this God wants to be praised? And that's the second step, because we're almost in Jahiliyyah again. We're very, very far from the truth, and I think it takes a lot of time to come back to the truth.
Yeah. I couldn't understand, why does God need my praise? And then it clicked, like, oh, he doesn't need anything. It's me who needs it on the day of judgment. Like, I'm doing it for myself, essentially. It's all me. It's all selfish. All those deeds are to stack up my good deeds. So it's not like when they tell you, like, pray 5 times a day, you're doing something for Allah. You're doing nothing. But it's doing it for your own salvation. So I couldn't, and many people don't, like, this simple idea, maybe like 90% of people don't know. Just like they think that God is this needy thing that needs the prayers and stuff, like, and it's just so simple to explain. But do you have any, I've heard you have the initiative of Islam Experience, right? Maybe you can talk about that. What are you doing with this project and the VR sets that you have? Because it's really interesting. I haven't really seen a similar thing going on.
Yeah, thanks. What we do is with some friends, we started the Islam Experience Center. And the Islam Experience Center is, we bought some, with the help from a lot of other friends, we bought some VR glasses. And what we did was we asked a company to write a VR movie. We put it on the glasses. And what we do is that we go around the country to schools, and we go to universities, we go to clubs, we go to everybody who says they're interested, and we offer it for free. And what we do is that we show people through virtual reality a brief history of Islam. So to give you an example, or tell you something about the movie itself, you put on the glasses, you're in your own living room, and you're watching television, and you see some bombs explode. You hear Islam, Muslim, Islam, all the negative stuff you see on the news, and all of a sudden, the screen goes black, and then you hear some knocking on the door. And then you stand up in the VR movie and you open up the door and there's a bright light. And all of a sudden you are in the year 850 in Baghdad, in Iraq. And then you're in the House of Wisdom. It's a very big mosque kind of place. It is a library, but it looks like a mosque, and it's all with green, with beautiful flowers in it. And it's we try to give people an image like how it was when we looked at the books, and they give a description of how it was. We try to make it in the same way, so the same image. And then in this library in the House of Wisdom, there's an old man, and he welcomes you, and he said, well, I was expecting you. And he starts talking, and he shows you a Quran, and you see like a hologram coming up with all letters, and he says, well, we're talking about history, and he shows you a map in the sky. You see Spain, you see China, and you see all the things that happened. And he said, well, let's go to the next place. And then you go to the next place, and you are in Mecca. And not the Mecca of nowadays with the McDonald's and all the fancy stuff, but old school Mecca. So a lot of sand, some palm trees, a market, some camels walking around, and you see the Kaaba, the old Kaaba. And he starts explaining this Mecca, why are people interested in this place, what they do, how do they pray, why do they pray. So you get a kind of a lesson, and then he says, well, listen, there's someone over there talking, and it's about Bilal. And Bilal you cannot really see him, but in the distance he says it's Bilal, and there's a shadow, and there's some Sahaba in front of him, and he starts explaining something, and you hear a hadith, and he explains it in normal, the language of the country, in our case in Dutch, or maybe when he is in England, you hear it in English or in French or whatever. And after that, he says, well, I'll take you to the next place. And then all of a sudden it gets dark. And then you are in the desert. You see a very big moon. And he starts explaining about science and Islam, and what is the combination, and why were there so much inventions in the places that he talked about earlier in the House of Wisdom and on the market in Mecca. And then you see a hologram of a plane, you see a hospital, and you see algebra and stuff like that, all things that are connected to Islam. And then in the end you hear the azan in the distance, and then you are back in your chair, and you start, your eyes are getting open, and then you're in front of the television again, like it was a dream. And then it's over. And what we do before we start looking at this VR program, we ask the contestants, what do you think about Islam? And it doesn't matter if it's negative or positive, and we write it on the board. So some people say, well, I hate Islam, terrorists, blood, etc. Well, we write it all down, and some people say it's terrific, it's the true religion, and we love everything about it. And we write it down. We look at the VR experience, and after it, we start explaining what did we see. So we go through the movie again, and then we go back to what the people initially said about Islam. And we said, how is it possible that you have such a negative image of Islam when we've just seen this? How do you think it is possible that there's such a gap between what we think and believe and see in Islam and what you think, see and believe what is Islam? And that way we try to make people understand Islam better. We try to give them a positive experience. And it is very fun, especially for youngsters as well. But also, when I look at it myself, I still think it's very fun to do. So that's good as well, that people have a positive experience when it comes to Islam. And it's educative, informative. So that's what we do with Islam Experience Center.
So after watching the movie, what do people usually say then? Do many people change their mind, or is it mostly positive after that?
Yeah, we did. We have. There was an organization did a little research for us, and about 75%, it was 74, I think, changed their views. They said, well, there was so much we didn't know. And they said, well, we look at Islam differently now. And we got back with some organizations and some groups, and they really said, well, it's stuck. We still think differently about Islam compared to before you came here with your VR experience. So it's a very, it has a positive impact on people. And they said, well, it's not necessarily that we want to become a Muslim, but that's not the goal. The goal is to take away primarily fears, or yeah, wrong ideas or misconceptions and stuff like that. And that works very good.
Mhm. How many people have tried it so far, or do you have any numbers on that?
Yeah, normally, we reach about 10,000 people a year. And we have a mobile service as well. And the mobile service we did last year, we got over 2,000 students and people from school. So it's and it's growing. We will get some more VR glasses in the coming months. So if we have more glasses, we can go to more schools. More schools means more students. It's a bigger reach. So when we get more support from people, we are able to share the message with more people. So that's it's a positive development.
Is it mostly students, or you basically get in, partner up with universities or maybe high schools and schools, or do you also work with some other organizations?
Yeah, also well, also with primary schools, the last groups of primary, so children from let's say 11, 12 years old,
Mhm.
but also the police, for example, in the Netherlands. We went to some departments of government. We went to like a church group, so it's very diverse. So it's and I think that's a good thing, because that's society. Society isn't everybody's the same. So
Yeah. So basically, I guess because I'm coming from a software development background as well. So like you have this storyline. Do you expand on it, or is it already finished, or are you going to be adding more chapters of movies or something like that to it as well?
yeah, well, this is the first movie, and it's about 7-8 minutes.
Okay.
And before we before we developed the movie, we did some research about what is the maximum of time that people can take to stay focused when it comes to serious topics like history or religion or whatever. And they said it's about 7 to 9 minutes. So we got in between. Because if it takes longer, people start losing their focus, so they will not hear everything anymore. And if it's shorter, people will say, "Hey, we want to see more. We want to see more." And so they said, "Well, if you got 8 minutes, that's fine. And if you want to have another topic, just write a new movie." And of course, it's expensive, so that's that's a disadvantage, and that's not very. That's something that stays a challenge, of course, but. It's something that we are looking for now, because there are so many stories to tell, so many lessons to give, so to say. But there will be, inshallah, other movies as well. But for now, we have just one movie, and that's good, because it's we're only 1 year. We exist only 1 year now, so.
Is there any revenue model, or is it like non-profit, activity right now?
No, it's now it's all a non-profit. So what we do, we get money from people who want to support us. We put some money in it ourselves. There are a lot of people donating and very, very generously, alhamdulillah. So that's a good thing. But it's all free, because that makes it easy for people to accept our coming to a school or whatever. If they have to pay for it or do something else, a lot of people say, well, it's like a company for them and stuff, and we don't want that. So we said, well, if as long as we are able to do it for free, we will do it for free. So a lot of volunteers are helping us, and the concept is very it's very, yeah, we call it laagdrempelig. There's there are no barriers for people to step in, so to say.
Is it possible to expand it? Like, I'm just thinking of, like, let's say I would take this, the everything you have, and do like an affiliate program where I would just translate it, because I don't have to develop any of this, because you already did it. So why would I do it? And we would just translate it and use it, and then working in other countries or something. Have you thought about this, or?
Yeah, there was a kind of a disconnection.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering if it's possible to take it and maybe apply it in a different country. Let's say that I would, we would translate it into our language, but we would keep everything original, the story and the development, the glasses, everything would be like, you are probably the developer behind the idea, but we would be like an affiliate or something like that. I don't know. Is it possible to do it like this, or have you partnered up with some organizations outside of Netherlands?
Really, that is that absolutely possible. We already are in contact with an organization, Voice of New Zealand. It's an organization in New Zealand, so that's very far away. An organization in the United States as well. We're now talking to an organization in the UK, in England. So we're starting to develop an English version. It's almost ready, I think in a month or something. So then we start doing the project, the Islam Experience Project in New Zealand for the first time outside of the Netherlands. So if there are other organizations or persons who say, hey, we want to translate it and we want to do the same thing as you do, yeah, of course, it's possible.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea because, like, especially for kids nowadays or people who want to learn, this is the way to go. And I don't see many organizations doing it in this way. And I think 10,000 people is a great achievement. So, yeah, I just think it's pretty scalable. So, but anyways, thank you for stopping by in this Sunday night and chatting with me about everything. And so Jazakallah khair for being here. And I would be very happy to stay in touch and maybe work with you and the VR company in the future, or do some other project together. Because
sounds great. Yeah, please do. You got my information, so we can stay in touch. And thanks again for the invitation. May God bless you for all the good work that you do. And salam alaikum.
You too. Salam alaikum.
Bye bye.